Hello everyone, welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Israel, and this is Parashat Balak. The Parsha can be found in Numbers 22 verse 2 until 25 verse 9. This one is called the Iron Dome. And all your children shall be disciples of the Lord, and all your children's peace shall increase. With righteousness shall you be established. Go far away from oppression, for you shall not fear, and from ruin, for it will not come near you. Behold, the one with whom I am not shall fear. Whoever mobilizes against you shall defect to you. Behold, I have created a smith who blows on a charcoal fire and produces a weapon for his work. And I have created a destroyer to destroy it. Any weapon formed against you shall not succeed, and any tongue that contends with you in judgment you shall condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their due reward from me, says the Lord. Remember this. This is a message for everyone. So again, what is the Torah? Is it a book of laws? Is it a way of life? After all, the literal translation of the word Torah means instruction, to instruct. So what's the purpose of following the mitzvot? Yes, we did discuss it last week. It's because God said so. It always comes down to that. But it's very difficult for people on both sides of the spectrum. I'm talking about both Jews and Gentiles alike, to fully understand logically what the purpose of these commands, these laws, and these statutes actually are, because we don't really see and how it makes any kind of a difference. But the thing is, and I'm going to ask you this, are we spiritual beings in a physical body in a physical world, or are we physical beings with a soul? Now again, to answer this and any other question in the Torah, as a rule of thumb, always, and I mean always, go back to the source. This is how it's done in all things. Because there can only be one truth by default. Everything else is just a counterfeit. Even if it's off by a fraction of a percent, it's a lie. So, are we a soul with the body or a body with the soul? Rabbi Tzvi Freeman explained this beautifully. People think the Torah is all about laws and rituals and quaint stories, with a mystical side as well. In truth, now listen up, in truth, the Torah is entirely spiritual. But when you cannot perceive the spiritual, all you see are laws and rituals and quaint stories. You understand that? So, where do we go to get our answers? The beginning. Adam, man. Adam was a being of light. He was 99% spirit and 1% physical, if at that. The Garden of Eden, it still exists today, but not in this realm. In order to be there, you can't be of the physical. That's where we go in the world to come after we die. That's where our neshama goes. In other words, our physical beings cannot coexist there. While our body returns to the dust of the earth, our soul goes to where God has first planted it, right? So this is why our nefesh is a fusion of the physical and the spiritual. All human beings, after all, have Adam's DNA. So then if we are indeed souls with a body and not bodies with a soul, that means that this physical book of the Torah and all its words given by God to us in its origin is not actually physical at all. And even more so, since the Torah predates time itself, as it always was here, all right? It is the word of God, no beginning, no end. Again, time was something that was created. Then all the things that have happened and that are currently happening had to happen and have to happen. So given this rationale, okay, can we agree on this in a sense? Given this thought process, this thought pattern, that means that a simple command, such as a blessing before we eat or drink, making a bracha, I'm going to have water, I make a blessing, thank God for the water, or putting on tefillin on my arm and on my head, wearing tzitzit, or anything else from the Holy One, blessed be He, has spiritual implications. So this we can understand because it says so. But still, yet, God made it so that the Torah can only be fulfilled in this physical existence. So, do we see the fruits of our labor? I mean, possibly. The Torah promises us long and prosperous lives should we live according to the Word of God and not our own understanding. But then you can also say there are many evil individuals who have lived long and prosperous lives according to their own understanding. The bottom line is, how can we actually see in this physical reality the spiritual fruit of our labor? The answer is, this is how I understand it. It's not what you can see, but rather what you don't see. You understand? So if you wipe away everything, it's sort of like what's left. You understand? You have to look at it in sort of like a passive sense, or just different eyes. So it's not that you choose not to see the fruit, but rather it's nothing that you have to worry about. Corrie ten Boom, she said, "Worry does not empty tomorrow of its sorrows. It empties today of its strength." How true is that? If we're so worried about the things that we do or that we don't do, about how God needs to reward us or punish us, even though God never punishes Israel, you have to understand what happens to us is perfect justice out of love for the sake of correction, right? I chasten those I love, spare thy rod, and so on. So what I'm going to attempt to show you in this teaching is the spiritual result of the physical action, the part that you don't see, but that actually is, by wiping away everything else. Now remember, all these events happened that we're reading about in the Torah in this Parsha. They happened for our benefit so that we can read and we can learn from this and pass it along to the next generation. Because hey, this goes back 3,500 years right now. Look at what we're doing. You understand what we are a part of right now? It's amazing. So let's learn them in truth. What do I mean? Well, let me tell you a story. Grab a drink. This is going to be a long one, but a good one. What's the name of the Parsha? It's Parashat Balak, right? So who was Balak? Balak ben Zippor. He was the king of Moab. Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. That's how the Parsha starts. So how come it doesn't say right here in his introduction that he was the king of Moab? Because he really didn't want to be the king of Moab. It says it later, if I recall correctly, it says it in verse 4, and he was the king of Moab at the time. Why at the time? Because they were rotating through kings. They were all being taken out one after the other. They just took the smartest dude that they knew. He was a smart guy. And they threw a crown on his head and they told him this. They said, here, deal with these Israelites and their God who just destroyed the two largest giants in the world. Og and Sichon were pre-flood giants. Og was even part of Abraham's posse back in the day. He was part of his camp. He entered into the tent of Abraham. And what do we know as a fact that happened to all the males who entered into the tent of Abraham? They all got circumcised. And that's right. Og, the king of Bashan, a pre-flood giant, a Rephaim, he was circumcised. But as we all know, we need two circumcisions, and not just one. We need the physical, blood, and we need spiritual, the heart and the mind. And that's what the tefillin represents, right? We put it in our arm against our heart, but also arm, which represents action. And we put it on our brain because our brain and our hearts are connected. The brain is actually called the heart in spiritual terms. So also, this is in last week's Parsha. I'll explain. Chapter 21:34. The Lord said to Moses, do not fear him, he's talking about Og, for I have delivered him, his people, and his land into your hand. You shall do to him as you did to Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who dwells in Heshbon. So they just took out Sihon, they were the same size giant, right? They smote him, his sons, and his people until there were no survivors, and they took possession of his land. So now, why did God tell Moses, don't be afraid of him? He wouldn't say, don't be afraid, lest there was fear, right? They weren't afraid of Sihon, so why were they afraid of Og? Because Moses knew who he was, and because he had a blood covenant with God. He knew about Og's history with Abraham. And so God gave them permission to end him. And Moses took him out himself, personally. Here you have a 120-year-old warrior, took out a 500-year-old giant. Gotta love the guy. So now the Amorites and the Moabites, they really hated each other. They were at war with one another. But here they decided to band together against Israel. The enemy of my enemy, right? So what does Balak do? He clearly sees that no matter what gets thrown at Israel physically, is like if you just beat our two heavy hitters, right? Anything you're going to throw at them is not going to hurt them. So he realized that the only way that can hurt Israel is spiritually speaking. So he's a smart guy indeed. And also his lineage would later on produce Ruth, great-grandmother King David. So even Balak was necessary. And so he calls for the most famous sorcerer and conjurer in the entire world, Balaam ben Beor. What was so unique about Balaam is that he fully commanded the powers of good and evil simultaneously. In other words, he had access to them both light and dark side of the force, if you will. He recognized God, he spoke to God, and God spoke to him directly, as we will see in the Parsha, and yet he was evil. Why and how could someone who is so evil be considered on a higher power level than Moses? Higher or more? See, there's a big difference. Just because you have more power levels does not necessarily mean that you are stronger. But he had, again, the light and the dark, where Moses was only focused on the light. You could also say that because Moses resisted the dark side, that he was stronger. You understand? Many ways to look at this. But how could Balaam have a direct access to God, given the life that he was living? The answer is very simple, actually, and for our benefit as well. If God would only have given all these blessings to Israel, the nations would have said, hey, no fair, you're clearly favoring them. Which God's like, yeah, but he said, no problem. I'm going to give you, the nations, the goyim, all the powers of the world. I'm going to speak to you. I'm going to grant you abilities. I'm going to tell you secrets. And now let's see what you're going to do with all these incredible gifts that I gave you. Balaam was a greedy rat who cursed people for silver, gold, and status. Oh yeah, and used to have sex with this donkey. True story. So if God grants you such power without you following him, behold, it starts with recognition. By the way, this is for today's day and age. It starts with recognition of homosexual marriage. Next thing is recognizing pedophiles, because hey, love is love, right? Watch. And then you think bestiality isn't far behind? If people are running around today identifying as another gender from what they actually are, there's some crazies even identifying as animals, as dogs and horses. And as soon as you legally recognize that person as a dog, what's to stop that person from pulling a Balaam on their family dog? Once you make it legal, it's on you. Now, don't shake your heads. Think back 30 years. The immorality levels are rising and becoming more open, mainstream, and brazen. Be careful, America. Don't let it happen. I'm talking to you with all the power that God gave you. Be good. Focus. You got to lead this world. At least until, the rain comes back to Judah. Anyway, all this power, what are we doing with it? So who is this Balaam, lover of animals? Let's talk about the book of Jasher a little bit. I've mentioned it before. It has the first recording of Balaam from the time that he was 15 years old. And Zepho, who's Zepho? He was the son of Eliphaz and the grandson of Esav, Edom, right? Was in those days daily enticing Angeas to fight with the sons of Jacob in those days. This is when the children of Israel, who were actually the children of Jacob, they moved down to Egypt and they were dwelling in the land of Goshen. And after some time, Angeas hearkened to the words of Zepho, Esav, who wanted to take out Jacob, and consented to him to fight with the sons of Jacob in Egypt. And Angeas got all his people in order, a people numerous as the sand which is upon the seashore, and he formed his resolution to go to Egypt to battle. And amongst the servants of Angeas was a youth, 15 years old. Balaam, the son of Beor, was his name. And the youth was very wise and understood the art of witchcraft. There is such a thing, witchcraft, till this very day. And Angeas said unto Balaam, conjure for us, I pray thee, with the witchcraft, that we may know who will prevail in this battle to which we are now proceeding. So, at this point, although the children of Israel, they don't know who Balaam is, now he knows who they are all too well. And Balaam the son of Beor was at the time with Angeas in the battle, and when he saw that Zepho prevailed over Angeas, they were fighting each other, he fled from there and came to Chittim. I'm skipping over parts here. I'm not going to read the whole book of Jasher right now. And Zepho and the children of Chittim received him with great honor, for Zepho knew Balaam's wisdom, and Zepho gave unto Balaam many gifts, and he remained with him. So we see Balaam's character over here. He is loyal only to himself. And Balaam the son of Beor, the Syrian, was there in the camp of Zepho, for he came with the children of Chittim to battle. And Balaam was a man highly honored in the eyes of Zepho and his men. And Zepho said unto Balaam, try by divination for us, that we may know who will prevail in the battle, we or the Egyptians. Now again, they were fighting the Egyptians to get to Bnei Israel. And Balaam rose up and tried the art of divination, and he was skillful in the knowledge of it, but he was confused, and the work was destroyed in his hand. And he tried it again, but it did not succeed. And Balaam despaired of it, and he left it and did not complete it. For this was from the Lord, in order to cause Zepho and his people to fall into the hand of the children of Israel, who had trusted in the Lord, the God of their ancestors, in their war. You understand? They weren't looking at their enemy. They were looking at God. Balaam could not prevail against the sons of Jacob, who were dwelling in the land of Goshen. This is right before the end of the book of Genesis and the beginning of Exodus. And it was after the death of the king of Chittim that Balaam the son of Beor fled from the land of Chittim, and he went and he came to Egypt, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Pharaoh received him with great honor, for he had heard of his wisdom, and he gave him presents and made him for a counselor. And Balaam dwelt in Egypt in honor with all the nobles of the king, and the nobles exalted him because they all coveted to learn his wisdom. See, God gives people this wisdom, and now they see how they use it. And in the 113th year of Israel's going down to Egypt, so now we know the date, Pharaoh dreamed that he was sitting upon his kingly throne, and lifted up his eyes and saw an old man standing before him. And there were scales in his hands, in the hands of the old man. Such scales are used by the merchants, you know. And the old man took the scales and hung them before Pharaoh. And the old man took all the elders of Egypt, and all the nobles and great men, and he tied them together and put them on one scale. And he took a milk kid, as in a baby goat, not a lamb, a goat, and put it on the other scale. And the kid preponderated over all. In other words, he was heavier than them all. And Pharaoh was astonished at this dreadful vision. Why the kid should be heavier over all, should rule over all. And Pharaoh woke, and behold, it was a dream. And Pharaoh rose up early in the morning and called all his servants and related to them the dream, and the men were greatly afraid. And the king said to all his wise men, "Interpret, I pray you, the dream which I dreamed, that I may know it." And Balaam the son of Beor answered the king and said unto him, "This means nothing else but a great evil that will spring up against Egypt in the latter days. For a son will be born to Israel who will destroy all Egypt and its inhabitants and bring forth the Israelites from Egypt with a mighty hand." Who's he talking about? He's talking about Moses, obviously. "Now therefore, O king, take counsel upon this matter that you may destroy the hope of the children of Israel and their expectation," because they were expecting to leave. There was a prophecy after all, "before this evil arise against Egypt." And the king said unto Balaam, "And what shall we do to Israel? Surely after a certain manner did we at first counsel against them, and could not prevail over them, because there were a lot, and they were smart, and they had God. Now, therefore give you also advice against them, by which we may prevail over them." And Balaam answered the king, saying, "Send now and call thy 2 counselors." He had 2 other guys over there. "And we will see what their advice is upon this matter, and afterward thy servant will speak." First, I want to see what they say, then I'll tell you what I say. He's also covering his own butt like this, by the way. And the king sent and called his 2 counselors, Reuel the Midianite and Job the Uzite. And they came and they sat before the king. That's right, Reuel the Midianite is the future father-in-law of Moses. And Job from the land of Uz, right? There was a man from the land of Uz, Uzite, whose name was Job, and that man was sincere and upright, God-fearing, and shunning evil. Perhaps they are one and the same. So at the time, Pharaoh's 3 wise men were Balaam, Jethro, and Job. You all know that? Now you do. And the king said to them, "Behold, you have both heard the dream, which I have dreamed, and the interpretation thereof. Now, therefore, give counsel, and know and see what is to be done to the children of Israel, whereby we may prevail over them, before their evil shall spring up against us." And Reuel the Midianite answered the king and said, "May the king live forever. If it seem good to the king, let him desist from the Hebrews and leave them, and let not stretch forth his hand against them. Leave him be, king. For these are they whom the Lord chose in days of old, and took as the lot of his inheritance from among all the nations of the earth and the kings of the earth. And who is there that stretched his hand against them with impunity, of whom their God was not avenged? Surely thou knowest that when Abraham went down to Egypt, Pharaoh, the former king of Egypt, saw Sarah his wife and took her for a wife, because Abraham said she was my sister, for he was afraid lest the men of Egypt should slay him on account of his wife. And when the king of Egypt had taken Sarah, and then God smote him and his household with heavy plagues, until he restored unto Abraham's wife Sarah, then he was healed. And Avimelech, the Gerarite, king of the Philistines, God punished on account of Sarah's wife of Abraham, Sarah the wife of Abraham, in stopping up every womb from man to beast. When their God came to Abimelech in the dream of night, and terrified him in order that he might restore to Abraham Sarah, whom he had taken. And afterward all the people of Gerar were punished on account of Sarah, and Abraham prayed to his God for them, and he was entreated of him, and he healed them. And Avimelech feared all this evil that came upon him and his people, and he returned to Abraham, his Sarah, his wife, and gave him with her many gifts. This is when Abraham started, becoming the wealthiest dude in the land. He did so also to Isaac, when he had driven him from Gerar, and God had done wonderful things to him, that all the water courses of Gerar were dried up, and their productive trees did not bring fruit. Until Abimelech of Gerar and Ahuzath, one of his friends, and Pichol, the captain of his hosts, went to him, and they bent and they bowed down before him to the ground. And they requested of him to supplicate for them, and he prayed to the Lord for them, and the Lord was entreated of him, and he healed them. The reason I'm reading this, by the way, is just so you understand, the Gentile world, the Goyim, the nations, they know our story. We need to know it too. Jacob also, the plain man, was delivered through his integrity from the hand of his brother Esau and the hand of Laban the Syrian, his mother's brother. How did they know these things? Because they do. Who had sought his life likewise from the hand of all the kings of Canaan, who had come together against him and his children to destroy them. The book of Jasher is also known as the book of the Sefer Milchamot Hashem, the Lord's Wars. If you get it, it has incredible battles between the 10 sons of Jacob, minus Joseph and Benjamin, against armies of 800, 900,000 strong. It's a good read. And the Lord delivered them out of their hands, that they turned upon them and smote them. For who have ever stretched forth his hand against them with impunity? Surely Pharaoh the former, thy father's father, raised Joseph, the son of Jacob, above all the princes of the land of Egypt, when he saw his wisdom. For through his wisdom, he rescued all the inhabitants of the land from famine. The land means not only Egypt, it was the entire world. Remember, Joseph told his brothers, do not be angry with yourselves that you have sold me into slavery, for the Lord has sent me before you in order to preserve life. Not only your life, life itself on earth. After which he ordered Jacob and his children to come down to Egypt in order that through their virtue, the land of Egypt and the land of Goshen might be delivered from famine. And it was. Now, therefore, if it seem good in thine eyes, cease from destroying the children of Israel. Is that, what are you, crazy? Look at what's going to befall you. Don't do this. But if it be not thy will that they shall dwell in Egypt, if you don't like them here, send them forth from here that they may go to the land of Canaan, the land where their ancestors sojourned. And when Pharaoh heard the words of Jethro, he was angry, so that he rose with shame from the king's presence and went to Midian, his land, and took Joseph's stick with him. We discussed this in Parashat Shmot. This staff of Joseph was given to him by Jacob, given to him by Isaac, Abraham, Noah, Methuselah, Adam. Who am I missing? Enoch, right. That's the lineage. Anyway, basically it comes from the throne of God and it ended up in Moses' hand. Watch Parashat Shmot. It's really interesting. It's like the sword and the stone. That's how it got to Moses, because then he took the staff, planted it in his backyard, and Moses picked it up later on. Anyway, let's move on. And the king said to Job, the Uzite, okay, you saw what happened to him. Now all eyes on you, Job. What are you going to say? What sayest thou, Job? What is thy advice respecting the Hebrews? So Job said to the king, behold, all the inhabitants of the land are in thy power. Let the king do as it seems good in his eyes. We have a word for a guy like that. Can't say it on this video though. And the king said unto Balaam, what dost thou say, Balaam? Speak thy word that we may hear it. And Balaam said to the king, of all that the king has counseled against the Hebrews, will they be delivered? And the king will not be able to prevail over them with any counsel. See, Balaam was also no fool. He really did want to take out Israel. They couldn't do it by the sword, right? They couldn't do it by the earth. So, for if thou thinkest to lessen them by the flaming fire, thou canst not prevail over them. For surely their God delivered Abraham, right? From the fire of Ul Kasdim. He was thrown into the fiery furnace. God delivered Abraham. So we can't take him out by fire. And if thou thinkest to destroy them with the sword, surely Isaac, their father, was delivered from it, right? Akedat Yitzchak. And a ram was placed in his stead. So you can't take him out with the sword, not fire, not the sword. And if with hard and rigorous labor thou thinkest to lessen them, thou wilt not prevail, even with this. For their father Jacob served Laban in all manner of hard work and prospered. How are we going to break these dudes? Not by fire, not by the knife, and not by hard labor. Now therefore, O king, hear my words. For this is the counsel which is counseled against them, by which thou wilt prevail over them, and from which thou shouldst not depart. If it please the king, let him order all the children which shall be born from this day forward to be thrown into the water. For by this canst thou wipe away their name, for none of them, nor none of their fathers, were tried in this manner. Not like this, not like that. Water. Let's do the test of water. See, he didn't know how good we are with water. And the king heard the words of Balaam, and the thing pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Balaam. So now I asks you, who came up with the idea to drown the children of Israel? That's right. It's none other than the animal lover himself, Balaam. But wait, it gets even better. And the king ordered a proclamation to be issued and a law to be made throughout the land of Egypt, saying, every male child born to the Hebrews from this day forward shall be thrown into the water. And you know the story. So some time passes, and when Pharaoh, king of Egypt, saw the counsel which Balaam had advised respecting the children of Israel did not succeed. Why? Why did it not succeed? In other words, kill all the male children. But now, how are they still multiplying? Remember the deception of the Hebrews. But that they still were fruitful, multiplied, and increased throughout the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh commanded in those days that a proclamation should be issued throughout Egypt to the children of Israel, saying, no man shall diminish anything of his daily labor. Okay, that's it. Now he's starting to take away bricks and so on and so forth with the hard labor. So that should be their focus, and not how to deceive Pharaoh. Didn't matter what Balaam advised his entire life from age 15 up until this point. He can't get him. Then Moses happens, right? The son that was promised. Fast forward 3 years. And in the 3rd year from the birth of Moses, Pharaoh was sitting at a banquet when Alperanith, the queen, was sitting at his right hand, and Batia, his daughter, on the left. And the lad Moses was lying upon her bosom. And Balaam the son of Beor, with his 2 sons, and all the princes of the kingdom were sitting at a table in the king's presence. And the lad stretched forth his hand upon the king's head. Moses sitting right here. Boom, grabbed the crown. And took the crown from the king's head and placed it on his own head. And when the king and the princes saw the work which the boy had done, the king and princes were terrified. And one man to his neighbor expressed astonishment. And the king said unto the princes who were before him at the table, what speak you, and what say you, O ye princes, in this matter? And what is the judgment against the boy on account of this act? Maybe a slap on the wrist or something, like, I'm still the Pharaoh. Yeah, sure, he's a 3-year-old kid, because kids don't do stupid things. And Balaam the son of Beor, look who's there. Balaam the son of Beor, the magician, answered before the king and princes, and he said, remember now, O my lord the king, the dream which thou didst dream many days since, and that which thy servant interpreted unto thee. Now therefore, this is a child from the Hebrew children, in whom is the Spirit of God. They recognized that the Spirit of God dwelt inside the Hebrews. In whom is the Spirit of God, and let not my lord the king imagine that this youngster did this thing without knowledge. For he is a Hebrew boy, and wisdom and understanding are within him. Thank you. Although he is yet a child, and with wisdom has he done this, and chosen unto himself the kingdom of Egypt. For this is the manner of all the Hebrews, to deceive kings and their nobles, to do all these cunningly things in order to make the kings of the earth and their men tremble. Surely thou knowest that Abraham their father acted thus, who deceived the army of Nimrod, king of Babel, and Avimelech, king of Gerar, and that he possessed himself of the land of the children of Heth and all the kingdoms of Canaan, and that he descended into Egypt and said to Sarah his wife, she is my sister, in order to mislead Egypt, the king of Egypt. His son Isaac also did the same thing. And he goes through a list. You know what? I don't need to read it to you. He basically says almost verbatim what Reuel, what Jethro said. Only he said it in a completely negative way, right? You know, it reminds me of, it's these Jews, man. It's these Jews. They got their hands in everyone's pocket, man. They own Hollywood, the media, the banks. Got to stop them, man. Same story, same narrative, only presented it like that. While good things were actually done, he presented it as a negative. Look at the world today. So different? No, it's exactly the same. If it pleases the king, and he goes on in his, Balaam-y fashion, let us now spill his blood. He's telling Pharaoh, let's kill your grandson right now. Let's spill it right now in front of everybody upon the ground, lest he grow up and take away the government from thy hand, and the hope of Egypt perish after he shall have reigned. But he doesn't stop there. And Balaam said to the king, let us moreover call for all the judges of Egypt and the wise men thereof, and let us know if the judgment of death is due to this boy, as thou didst say, and then we will slay him. In other words, he wanted an audience. It's like, you ever see those, what was it? Oh, it was like, Austin Powers, right? It makes fun of James Bond. It's like, let's just kill him now. No. I'll just put him over there. Or I'll tell them my evil plan. This is what he's doing. Hey, he's just take the kid out. But no, wait. Let's get everybody here. I want everybody to see this. He wants to glorify in this deed. And Pharaoh sent and called for all the wise men of Egypt, and they came before the king, and an angel of the Lord came amongst them, disguised, and he was like one of the wise men of Egypt, looked like a regular man. And the king said to the wise men, surely you have heard what this Hebrew boy who is in the house has done, and thus has Balaam judged in the matter. Now judge you also, and see what is due to the boy for the act he has committed. Talking about a 3-year-old kid. And the angel, who seemed like one of the wise men of Pharaoh, answered and said as follows. Before all the wise men of Egypt and before the king and the princes, what did he say? If it please the king, let the king send for men who shall bring from before him an onyx stone and a coal of fire, and place them before the child. And if the child shall stretch forth his hand and take the onyx stone, then shall we know that with wisdom has the youth done all that he has done, and we must slay him. But if he stretch forth his hand upon the coal, then shall we know that it was not with knowledge that he did this thing, and he shall live. And the thing seemed good in the eyes of the king and the princes. So the king did according to the word of the angel of the Lord. See, at the end of the day, Pharaoh was put on the spot publicly by Balaam, made even more public. And at the end of the day also, he really didn't want to kill his grandson. And the king ordered the onyx stone and the coal to be brought and placed before Moses. Here it is. And they placed the boy before them. And the lad endeavored to stretch forth his hand to the onyx stone. But the angel of the Lord took his hand and placed it upon the coal. And the coal became extinguished in his hand. And he lifted up and he put it in his mouth. And he burned part of his lips and part of his tongue. And he became heavy in mouth and tongue. You want to know how Moses had a stutter and a lisp? Right there, from when he was 3 years old. Here we go. And when the king and princes saw this, they knew that Moses had not acted with wisdom in taking off the crown from the king's head. So the king and the princes refrained from slaying the child. So Moses remained in Pharaoh's house growing up, and the Lord was with him. And whilst the boy was in the king's house, he was robed in purple and grew amongst the children of the king. Purple is a sign of royalty. In other words, he was like a made man in the royal family, if you will. And when Moses grew up in the king's house, Batya, the daughter of Pharaoh, considered him as a son, and all the household of Pharaoh honored him, and all the men of Egypt were afraid of him. Now, do you realize just how bad God made Balaam look in front of the king of Egypt, in front of everybody else? He made him look like a complete fool. In front of the royal family, he was a laughingstock. At this moment, if it wasn't enough that Balaam had a personal vendetta against Israel, since he could never prevail against them, now all his rage and his frustration were focused on the single individual, Moses. You know, it's like Moses was an undercover guy and Balaam's like, I know you, but nobody else could see it, right? He's like, it's one of those. And he daily went forth and he came into the land of Goshen. where his brethren, the children of Israel, were. And Moses saw them daily in shortness of breath and hard labor. See, he knew he was one of them. And Moses asked them, saying, wherefore is this labor meted to you day by day? And they told him that all that had befallen them, and all the injunctions which Pharaoh had put upon them before his birth. They told him what happened. It's like, what? And they told him all the counsels which Balaam, the son of Beor, had counseled against them, and what he had also counseled against him in order to slay him when he had taken the king's crown off his head. Oh yeah. And when Moses heard these things, his anger was kindled against Balaam, and he sought to kill him. And he was in ambush for him day by day. He was just waiting to take him out. And Balaam was afraid of Moses, rightfully so. And he and his 2 sons rose up and went forth from Egypt, and they fled and delivered their souls and betook themselves to the land of Cush, to Kikanus, king of Cush. It's like, yeah, you better run. So, Moses is all grown up now. But Balaam comes back to Egypt later on after burning all his bridges elsewhere. And of course, after he hears that Moses is now an enemy of the state. So 60 years go by, right? Moses returns to Egypt with Aaron, and they come before Pharaoh. Now, this Pharaoh is not the same Pharaoh that knew Moses from back then. And Moses and Aaron came to Egypt, to the community of the children of Israel, and they spoke to them all the words of the Lord. And the people rejoiced in exceeding great rejoicing. And Moses and Aaron rose up early the next day, and they went to the house of Pharaoh, and they took in their hands the stick of God, the rod, Moses' staff. What is this? This is we discussed last week. And when they came to the king's gate, 2 young lions, this is a fun story, 2 young lions were confined there with iron instruments, and no person went out or came in before them, unless those whom the king ordered to come. When the conjurers came and withdrew the lions by their incantations, and this brought them to the king. In other words, if you could get past the lions, you could come see the king. So lions, the conjurers, they had the incantation, the magic, sleep. Right? Anyway, Moses hastened and lifted up his stick upon the lions, and he loosed them. He took you crazy? And Moses and Aaron came to the king's house. The lions also came with them in joy. And they followed them and rejoiced as a dog rejoices over his master when he comes from the field. Oh my God, you're back. I thought you're never gone. I'm so happy you're here. Can we go out? I love you. Throw me the ball. Where's my food? All that good stuff. They were like little puppies. And when Pharaoh saw this thing of these great big lions acting like little puppy dogs, he was astonished at it. And he was greatly terrified at the report, for their appearance was like the appearance of the children of God. That's what it says. And Pharaoh said to Moses, What do you want, dude? And they answered him, saying, The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has sent us to thee to say, Send forth my people that they may serve me. Let my people go. And when Pharaoh heard their words, he was greatly terrified before them. And he said to them, Go today and come back tomorrow. And they did according to his word. Right? He's like, okay, I got to do some stuff. Let me call my people. All this happens. He calls Balaam, right? The staff. Balaam says, I'm Balaam, son of Beor. The magician answered the king, saying, These are none else than magicians like ourselves. It's cheap magic tricks. Now therefore send for them and let them come, and we will try them. And the king did so. So now you all know the rest of the story, all right? But what you didn't know, and what you did not see, is evil lurking at every turn since Israel became a nation. The forces of evil, anti-Semitism, are always there seeking how to destroy us. So now you know a little bit more who Balaam ben Beor is, hater of Israel, yet lover of donkeys. Now try and imagine his feelings, I guess, conflict, excitement when he got the call to come and curse Israel. Fast forward to, boom, present day Numbers, or Bamidbar. After doing a further study, I realized that at this point, as much as Balaam wanted to see the destruction of Israel, and of course Moses, he was defeated, and he knew it. I mean, after the Exodus, Egypt was destroyed. He fled, he was a mercenary for hire, if you will. After the Exodus, he was done with them. He's like, all right, fine, I hate them, I'll hate them forever, but there's nothing that I can do. But God was not done with him. And that's why he was called. And that's why he said the second time that they came to ask him, Balaam answered and said to Balak's servants, even if Balak gives me a house full of silver and gold, I cannot do anything small or great that would transgress the word of the Lord my God. The Lord my God? Did Balaam just say again, the Lord my God? Does he serve him? Is he his God? How could the Lord, our Lord, be his God if he is such a wicked man? Ask yourself, do we know any wicked people who claim that our Lord is their God? Sure we do. So it's like that. Depart from me. I never knew you and all that. And yet still, Balaam was hopeful that maybe, just maybe, Israel would be in a state of sin, thereby exposing them to curses. See, he knew how things worked. So why does God first say, don't go with them, and the second time he says, go with them, but don't curse them? Did God just contradict himself? No, obviously not. So we have to see the language here, and of course in the Hebrew, because as always, you will miss it. So first we have the exchange. This is how it's playing out in my head, right? And just notice, by the way, when God speaks to Balaam, it's not in the Shem Hashem, the Yud He Vav He, it's actually in Elohim. Now the Yud He Vav He represents mercy, while Elohim represents judgment. Balaam did not deserve to speak to the name of God, or that the name of God should speak to him. A different aspect, different element, one God, okay? We've discussed this before. God came to Balaam, verse 9. God came to Balaam and said, who are these men with you? Balaam said to God, Balak the son of Zippor, the king of Moab, has sent them to me, saying, behold, the people coming out of Egypt, a nation has covered the eye of the earth. What's the eye of the earth? It's not only the eye of this earth. It's the eye of, it says, V'achas ein haaretz. The deeper meaning is that basically, as in earth as it is in heaven, they're already covering the eye of heaven. In other words, their power, you couldn't rival their power because they had God's protection. Come and curse them for me. Perhaps I will be able to fight against them and drive them out. Maybe. God said to Balaam, you shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people because they are blessed. So that was verse 12. And now let's see what God tells him in verse 20. Now first, I just want to read in Hebrew. Vayomer Elohim el Bilam lo telech imahem, with them, lo ta'or et ha'am ki baruch hu, baruch baracha, right? Berech, blessed. Now verse 20, here's the second time. God came to Balaam at night and said to him, if these men have come to call for you, arise and go with them, but the word I speak to you, that you shall do. Vayavo Elohim el Bilam laila, night. Vayomer lo, told him, im likro lecha ba'u, if to call to you they came, ha'anashim, the people, kum, get up, lech, go, itam, with them, ve'ach et hadavar asher adaber elecha oto taseh, but that which I speak to you, you shall do. So now what's the difference between these two verses? God said no, and then God said yes. The difference is imahim and itam. So now, I understand why this would be confusing if you read it in any other language aside from Hebrew, and not even in the standard modernized Hebrew. You need the sages for this. Look at what they say. The proper way to translate both these things, imahem and itam, in English is with them. They both mean with them. Go with them, go with them. That's what it means. But in Hebrew, our sages had to really struggle to find what happened here. That first God said no, then he said yes, and then after he said yes, God was angry with Balaam and tried to kill him. What's going on here? So what did they do? What did our sages do? They studied the actual letters. Imahem, the prohibition, this is from the verse 12, means joined with them as in the same desire of the heart as one. Imahem. So if I absolutely had to translate the meaning in this context, it would be as one of them. Do not go as one of them. While itam from verse 20 The permission means simply to physically go with them, but not in like-mindedness. So go with them, but not as one of them. You understand? Or in other words, God was telling him, I want you to physically go over there because I need you there, but you do not have my permission to do what you want. You're going to say what I tell you to say. So he just received a command from God. Here's a command. When God tells you to do something or not to do it, that's a command from God. Do not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. If you ate from it, you broke my command, straight up. And here we are. So what happens? In the morning, Balaam arose, saddled his she-donkey, and went with the Moabite dignitaries. I'm going to read this in Hebrew. Let's see who can catch on. Vayakam Bilam baboker, vayachvosh et atono, vayelech im sarei Moav. Right? It could have been said vayelech itam, meaning with the Moabites, but it specifically said im sarei Moav, which again in English is exactly the same meaning. But now that we learned something new, we know that although God specifically commanded him not to go curse Israel and be as one of them, those who wanted to curse and destroy Israel, nevertheless, Balaam could not overcome his hatred or this opportunity and was indeed one of them, like-minded, imam. As a result, next verse, 22, God's wrath flared because he was going, and an angel of the Lord stationed himself on the road to thwart him, and he was riding on his she-donkey, and his two servants were with him. See, God always knows what's in our hearts. It doesn't matter what we say, or what it appears on the outside that we're doing. Oh, okay, you mean you go with them? Dude, I know that you know what I mean. Wait. So then, there's the squeezing of the leg, the beating 3 times, and the angel only seen by the donkey. And the donkey speaks and says, am I not your she-donkey on which you have ridden since you first started until now? Have I been accustomed to this to you? He said, no. See, this takes a whole new meaning now, doesn't it? The Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a sword drawn in his hand. He bowed and prostrated himself on his face. This angel was coming to kill Balaam. And so why did he not kill Balaam? Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned. And that's it. That saved his life at that moment. Not his soul, his life. Just over there, just enough for him to do what God needed him to do. He openly admitting that he was on his way to disobey God and curse Israel. Oh, right? Now, it's amazing the madness of anti-Semitism, because this is really what it is, right? You would endanger your own life to do harm to the Jewish people. I mean, as I'm writing this and studying this, you guys familiar with Golda Meir? She was an incredible prime minister back in the 70s. Brilliant woman. She said the following, when in an interview, you can actually Google this, peace will come when the Arabs will love their children more than they hate us, because they send their children to go blow us up. You understand what this is? The mental psychosis of this. She continues, when peace comes, we will perhaps in time be able to forgive the Arabs for killing our sons, but it will be harder for us to forgive them for having forced us to kill their sons. This is what Israel faces every day. Anti-Semitism is straight up demonic possession. There's no other way about it. It's completely irrational and illogical. So, Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned, right? That's what he said. And all the rest is just excuses. For I did not know that you were standing on the road before me. Now, if it displeases you, I'll go back. What's he saying? Oh, hey, he gets his hand in the cookie jar. I didn't see you there. You weren't supposed to be here. If I would have known you would bust me, then I never would have done what I did. Come on. So is he really sorry? This is, oh, I've sinned. Is that a true repentance? No, not even a little bit. He's sorry he got busted, But notice he didn't even take responsibility for what his true intentions were. And because of that, next verse, the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, go with these men. Wait, I'll read it in Hebrew, because now we're smarter, right? Vayomer malach Adonai el Bilam, lech im ha'anashim ve'efes et hadavar asher adaber elecha oto tadaber, vayelech Bilam im sarei Balak. That's right, you guessed it. The Hebrew says im ha'anashim, im sarei Balak, or in other words, you wanted to go with them, imahem, you're going to end up just like them. No problem. Carry on, for indeed your end will be as theirs. And Balaam knew this, and so he also knew that he had one last job to do as he was marching to his death. Which is why the first thing out of his mouth when he's standing above Israel over there, you see chapter 23, 8, 9, and 10. How can I curse whom God has not cursed? And how can I invoke wrath if the Lord has not been angered? For from their beginning I see them as mountain peaks, and I behold them as hills. It is a nation that will dwell alone, and will not be reckoned among the nations. Who counted the dust of Jacob, or the number of the fourth, or of the seed of Israel? Now look what he says. May my soul die the death of the upright, and let my end be like this. Sorry, buddy. This is not how you're going out. You got to earn a righteous death, okay? You have to live a righteous life. However, even if you have lived a treacherous life, but you did true tshuva, at the very end, you can still die a righteous death. You can still die at tzaddik. Look at Samson, for example. But that's not what happened here at all, now is it? When he looked upon Israel for what would be, the last sequence of times, because he went up there 3 times, he lost all control. In other words, of himself. The time for free will was over. His wicked ways would ultimately be his own end, but not before God made him talk like a puppet. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. He saw the first, the second, and the third temples. He saw it, but he could never be part of it. All he could do is weep as he looks upon the holy people of God, the chosen people of God, who he has set aside for himself from the nations, knowing that he will never be one of them and never be able to destroy them. All he could do at this point was choke on his own envy. What else did he say? He crouches and lies like a lion and like a lioness. Who will dare rouse him? Those who bless you shall be blessed, and those who curse you shall be cursed. Amen. And so, my dears, what is the point of this story? Well, I don't mean to alarm anybody out there, but right now, someone is planning to harm you. Right now. Something is on its way to get you. And even now, at this very moment, like now, there are weapons being formed against you. Should we be concerned? Should we be afraid? Hells no. Did God not give us his word when he said any weapon formed against you shall not succeed? And any tongue that contends with you in judgment, you shall condemn? This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their due reward from me, says the Lord. Do we believe God when he says this? Do we trust him? Where's Moses here? Is Moses even mentioned in part of this story? No. Did he even need to be? No. Were the children of Israel concerned about what was happening around them? Were they even aware? Did they even care? No, and no. If you knew how much you were being targeted as Jews, I guarantee you'd never be sleeping at night. But you don't need to worry about that. That's the thing. Just like the children of Israel did not worry. They weren't even aware. For all they were concerned, Balaam was a mosquito. Every single command, mitzvah, that the Lord gave, that they fulfilled, built a spiritual, impenetrable iron dome that not only foils enemy attacks or any curse, but turns them into blessings. Every time we do what God commands us, from the greatest mitzvah to the least, we secure yet another layer of spiritual protection and elevation. This is our Torah. Ladies and gentlemen, these are our instructions given by God to Moses to us. This is our heritage. The action that builds the spirit, the action, the physical action that builds the spirit. Who can comprehend such a thing? Oh yes, we are safe in here. We are eternal in here. And all who find themselves ready to curse God's people out of anger, jealousy, or for any other reason in existence, I invite you to come join us. Stop for a second. Just look back at history. You're not fighting us. You're fighting the truth, and you will never succeed. You see, as long as we keep to God's word, no weapon formed against us will prosper. Don't focus on all the bad. There's plenty of it. It's not relevant to God's children. But keep your eyes on He who made you, on He who breathed life into you for a time such as this. Oh, what a wonderful time it is to be alive. And to my friends and my foes, again, I remind you, the tent is always open for business. So, in that spirit, come get some. As always, thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of the week and have a Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.